All right. So if you look at your company's projections for 2021 and you compare them to what you think they're going to end up being in 2020, do you expect them to be up, down, or level?
No, we definitely expect to be up. The disruptions that occurred this year didn't cancel any projects, it put them on hold. And in fact, it sped some projects up, which was good for us. But ultimately, I think a lot of projects that were put on hold are going to come back online with next year's budget.
Sure.
And we're going to see an increase because of that, and because I think a lot of people have been very conservative in their buys. I know we have, right? You're not putting a lot on the shelf. You just have what you need. We're really putting the just-in-time into just-in-time inventory. So I think a lot of people have really pushed that as far as they can. And, at some point there just has to be a restock. And so, I think a lot of people in our industry will benefit from that in the first and second quarter of next year. And then it'll be up to the upswing in the economy, which I also think is coming. And that will right a lot of situations for a lot of people. Ultimately, if COVID gives us another surprise, all bets are off. But
Sure.
Barring that, I think we've learned a lot. Since mid-March. I think a lot of us have become very mobile in this new environment, and are I don't want to say comfortable in a new environment, but we get it and we're moving forward with what we have. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that's kind of emerged as I've been talking to people is that it seems like some of the industry has done, actually really well during COVID, whereas some people have just gotten absolutely, crushed. And it almost seems like if you're involved with, the medical oxygen, you're pretty safe, and otherwise you've been in a little bit of trouble. So if you had to project out for the whole industry, or GATA as a whole, would you still expect positive growth next year, or would that be more case by case?
It's always, I don't want to say case by case, but region by region. Some regions are just hotter than others. I think that the markets that tend to be aggressive in the markets are already in that position. They may not be as aggressive as you want them to be, but they're more aggressive than the rest of the country, right? And I think most of us have had that experience. I know, in regards to Weldcoa, in 2020, we put out more medical fill systems than we have in probably the previous 3 years. We just put out a tremendous amount of product. So it's been really interesting.
Absolutely. So I don't want to make this kind of the how you doing, Melissa? I don't want to make this, too COVID focused, although it is difficult to kind of, separate, a forecast from what's, really going on in the world here. But have you seen any other kind of macro trends that have emerged in the last, couple of years, several years, inflation, consolidation, steel prices, anything like that you expect to also be continuing, expanding, and impacting business in 2021, COVID aside?
Hey, Tim. Hey, Melissa. It's been kind of funny. I mean, myself and a lot of, more traditional armchair economists long expected inflation to kick in, and it just hasn't happened. We've actually, in some degrees, seen the opposite occurring. It's been an interesting, from an economic situation purely, to watch what's been happening. In my mind, I hear this argument among my peers, and I always find it interesting. The most important thing that can happen right now, without a doubt, is for confidence to return to the market. And how do you do that, right? And the government historically has tried a lot of different things to make that happen. Back in '08, they did the big bank bailout, right? During the Great Recession, they gave the banks all this money in the hopes that they would loan it. And the banks were like, you misunderstand. We're not in the loaning business. We're in the getting paid back from those loans business. So we're not going to put that money out there because we don't think it's going to come back to us because there's no confidence in the market right now. And they were right, and again, from a purely cold-blooded business standpoint, they were right. There was no confidence at that time. Confidence took years to come back into the market. In 2017, the current administration did something very aggressive, from an economical standpoint. They did these tax cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, right? And that was an interesting experiment. They basically cut the corporate taxes, I think, from 35% to 21%, something like that. And I thought, and a lot of people thought, it was going to be a go. People were going to do things. But the reality was the larger corporations bought back their stocks. They didn't reinvest, right? And the smaller companies like mine, we looked around the market, we saw the current trends, and we saw everything going down. So we sat on our tax break as well. We said, you know what, we're safer with that money in the bank, and as things improve, as confidence enters back in the market, we're going to reinvest. And when you pull that trigger, that's the great debate. That's what makes you more aggressive or less risk averse, I should say, than everybody else. But in 2020, we got to see a totally different experiment with the advent of COVID. The government gave money directly to people, right, that lost their jobs. They infused all this money. And, a lot of people always said, if you give the money to the people, they're going to spend it, and that's going to stimulate the economy. And it wasn't exactly that. I mean, it did happen, right? People get money. Human nature is they're going to spend it. But what did they spend it on? They spent it on food. They spent it on bills. They didn't run out and buy new cars. They didn't run out and buy a new house. I mean, some people did, but those people were already in a position where they could do it, right? So we've seen those three experiments play out, over the last however many years. And in my mind, right now, the government is sitting on the greatest confidence builder that could probably exist. And the confidence builder would be if they invested in the U.S. infrastructure. Now, they've been talking about it forever, right? There's this historic infrastructure bill that was supposed to get passed a couple of years ago, then it was going to get passed last year, this year, hopefully next year. But, by and large, if you look at the economy as your own personal checkbook, how do you make money? Do you make money when you buy a TV? Do you make money when you buy a car? No, you spent your money, right? You make money by investing. If the government invests in this infrastructure project, they're talking several $1 trillion, right? I think it's funny, as a side note, the Society of American Engineers said the government had to basically invest $4 trillion to get our roads and our water facilities and our power structure, the grid, back to the way it should be. And the government said, we hear you, we're going to invest $2 trillion, right? It's almost ridiculous, right? But I'll take it. $2 trillion invested in the American market would be a huge boon to almost every American. It would create a lot of jobs. It would stimulate a lot of B2B activity. That is where the money needs to go. That is, the mega wave that would help this country right itself, without a doubt.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I don't want to spend a whole ton of time on COVID. I think we've kind of covered that. But so let's kind of shift gears and look at Weldcoa 2021. Obviously, you've had some pretty exciting things this year. A lot of your webinars, your Weldcoa Wednesdays, really kind of cool, forward-thinking things. What have you got in store for next year that you're really jazzed up about?
Well, so next year is in a way it's sort of anyone's guess. If you are not already creating value through a digital resource you're really behind the 8 ball, right? And we were ahead of the curve when COVID came. We had already created a lot of information that was of value to our clients, and we just presented it in a different way than we had been. But we already had it, and so it was Melissa's idea, Melissa Hurd, our marketing director of marketing, to do the webinars, and it had been something that we'd been kicking around for a while. But all of one thing grows from another thing, grows from another thing. It had all started from a podcast idea that we had been playing with and we had started to do, and then COVID hit and we ramped it up and turned it into the webinars. So next year, depending on how the digital playground is only going to get larger. It's not going to go away. Companies have recognized, I save a lot of money by contacting people this way. I can measure it, and it is something that I can do in a very broadband sort of way. I can reach a lot without a tremendous amount of energy, and people are recognizing that it's not going to go away. Now, traditional sales, where sales engineers go out into the field and they help clients to make a decision, that's not going to go away either. But it's not going to be the same as it was. They're going to be using these new tools. That's for sure.
No question. How about any plan, that you're ready to talk about? Any product launches, new lines, anything like that you want to get kind of whet people's appetites about?
So, Missy had given me a heads up on some of the questions you were going to ask. And normally this is what I look forward to. I can talk about this thing or that thing that we've been working on. But for the first time in our history as a company, we're working on projects with companies, and we have non-disclosures in place. And it's not unusual for us to have a non-disclosure with a company, but it is unusual to have this many at one time, where we are doing some pretty cool new stuff in regards to medical filling, in regards to CO2, in regards to dry ice, but I can't really go into any detail, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So you just mentioned a couple of the niche markets that I was going to bring up. Obviously, medical oxygen has been big this year. Dry ice with the advent of the vaccine, gotta ship it. Any other markets that maybe that you entered, you plan to enter, or just that you kind of see coming about as a result, maybe of the pandemic, or just that they were coming anyway, but that you see as growth markets for the industry in the next few years?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but obviously several more states opened themselves up to the cannabis market. So that's, a growth market that everybody's been looking at. What's going on in the field of hydrogen is very interesting. The LNG markets are as murky as they've ever been. So I'm really not going to comment on there. It's hard to someone a long time ago told me the best way to make a small fortune in LNG is to start with a large fortune. And I've seen that play out over time. So I really have nothing further to comment in that area.
Absolutely. We kind of covered a big swath of ground here, but is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think will contribute positively or negatively to the potential economic outlook next year, but whether for Weldcoa or for the industry as a whole?
Again, we at this point in time, as I consider myself a very pure capitalist, and so I normally would want very little government interaction, right? But in situations like this is exactly when we do need our government to get involved. They need to make the investments to stimulate the economy. Giving away the money just gives away, possible resources. They have to invest the money. They have to interject it into the economy in a smart way that creates more business. And I think they know how. I don't know if they have the will to do it. There's too much infighting that needs to go away.
Absolutely. From your lips to God's ears on that. Awesome. Well, Hector, thank you so much. Always appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of the year, great Thanksgiving, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed talking to you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.